Good evening. Hello. Gemma G here. Thursday night, and it's been quite the week here at the Braemar Club in Auckland. We had our practitioners holistic level 4 practical course, and we're a couple of amazing therapists who are just grasping the whole holistic level of therapy in the frequency medicine world like incredibly well. It's really neat to see. So that was quite hectic, and of course a lot of fun adventures along the way as well. But I wanted to jump on tonight and share a little bit, because I'm back to my PhD again. And actually I've got to say, loving it, really am. So I'm going to share a little bit about a paper that I've just read, and I really do believe in everything that we do leading with curiosity, because it's through curiosity that you're then able to observe. So if you are there, I can't actually see who you are, and I know that you're out there. So hit me a comment up so I know who I'm talking to, because I love to be able to engage you. And also any questions that you may have, please feel free to jump in also. So this is an article that, hold on a second, let me just make sure I'm going to tell you the date that it was written. It's from the North American Journal of Medical Sciences, and it was published in 2012. So let me bring up, right, I'll just pop that to there and then I can jump back on again. All right, and so basically it's an article where they are discussing and looking at different perspectives on the cost of diagnosing and treating dis-ease, and how that continues to rise, right? And I've spoken about this before. It's again with curiosity, that with all of the technology and the knowledge that we have in the Western world and the advancements in our healthcare that we have, how is it that we still have very poor outcomes, shall we say, in terms of management of chronic dis-ease? And I mean, let's even go a step further and go, well, why is it that we have so much chronic dis-ease globally? Surely we ought to be moving towards better way of life, better way of living, better health, more abundance, all of that. And so basically this article sort of talks a little bit about how every new test that we come up with, or that the medical world comes up with, it increases the complexity and the cost of the healthcare as well. Now, we've always said, you know, we have this multidisciplinary team, yet in my experience in the Western world, there's not a lot of multidisciplinary that goes on, unfortunately. And then, of course, we've got so many specialists now, and nobody really is looking at a system from a holistic approach, or the fact that we are metaphysical beings. And so it talks about medical scanning technologies, you know, that we have, and we have some wonderful technologies that have been developed, and the advancements in that area, but they're all based on the body's response to an external stimuli. So, for example, ultrasound, or MRIs, or X-rays, or thermographies. And I always say, even from a being perspective, and of course the more you be, and if you're in a familiar mood for a while, it becomes a characteristic, then it becomes, you know, personality trait, etc., and you become your own self-fulfilled prophecy in all many ways, right? So it's how our inner world responds to the external environment. So keep that in mind because that's really helpful. It's going to come up again in a little bit. And so that we have biomarker and histopathology tests as well, like all sorts of different testings are available, urine testing, liver function testing, blood work, etc., and or tissue cultures and on and on. They all have inherent limitations. So we don't speak about this, and when you go to maybe you're going for a checkup or you're going to the hospital, whatever it is that you're going for, they really don't inform you of that. There's so many limitations to the tests that they administer and use to try and diagnose whatever's going on. You take blood tests, for example, your blood pH and contents of a blood sample will change from moment to moment. So it's kind of a snapshot of a moment in time, and that's about it. Urine tests, yes, are more accurate and give you a better idea of what's going on. However, but they're saying that whether the biomarkers or histopathology tests, they have inherent limitations because diseases are often polygenic and or influence the function of multi-physiological systems. So nothing gets injured in isolation. And the body has like its own priority line in terms of where is it going to provide the resources, what is happening in the body, and it's all through a hierarchy within that system as well. And we speak of in our world with the work that we do in the frequency medicine world, or frequency therapy, whatever floats your boat, is that emotions will trump anything and everything. And emotions are energy in motion, and some of those emotions hold a very positive high vibe and raise your system, and others will have a low, very strong low vibration that will impact your body's overall functioning as well. Because remember, all cells vibrate at a certain rate. Neurons communicate through vibration. It's how we are as energetic beings. However, along with those, either high vibe for those upper emotions like joy and love and gratitude, they will have a biochemistry attached with that as well. So there's this electromagnetic signature that gets pushed out. Same thing with your negative emotions and fear and shame and frustration, anger. They have a certain biochemistry with that also, and your body adapts. It adapts to it all the time. So these biomarkers, there'll be some detection in the ability of the biochemistry within the body, for example. However, they do have a lot of limitations. They're not giving you the whole picture. And then what they do is they take the results from any of this biomarkers or histopathologies, and then they compare them to an expected, what am I looking for? Expected norms. And I always find that one interesting also, because what they do through lab works is that they will take average these normal variations, let's say, whether it's from a liver function, for example, or a variation between certain proteins that they're looking for, and they'll compare them to randomly selected samples that they take from labs probably every 6 months. And so I always say, well, it's not really that accurate, is it? It gives you a bit of a glimpse. But just think about who is it that goes and gets blood work. Typically, it's those that are in the unhealthy population. So are your normal levels, in fact, all that accurate? So just other things to think about also. And that, of course, then makes it quite difficult to really get a proper gauge on things. And it also doesn't allow for diagnosis of onset. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah, so limitations with them. And then, of course, the techniques only measure what the clinicians want or expect to see. So you kind of tend to be ruling either things in or things out, or either or, right? But depends on the sensitivity and the specificity of the test also. Anywho, there's not a clear understanding of how the body regulates its function. We think we've got a good grasp on it, but really, when it comes down to it, we know we're always hunting for homeostasis because it's the most efficient state to be in. Low energy, etc., etc. Everything's functioning efficiently, and we're always where am I at with this? Hold on a second. I've just lost my notes. And we do know it's through the autonomic nervous system. There's regulations. We know vibrations in the body. We know meridians. We understand what organs do. There's a lot of understanding, absolutely. However, how that happens and how we regulate our function, we just don't really quite know. We scratch the surface, really, because at a subatomic level, I mean, what's happening at that level, we haven't even got to that understanding. So even following through a biomolecular pathway and to being able to kind of look at sequelae of events, for example, we're still going to head up against limitations because there's just so much happening all at once from a biofusion level that we really don't have a full understanding. A good one, but not a full one. So given that, the other thing we do know also is that invisible inflammation is the root cause of all dis-ease. So there are some things we're very clear on. So I'll say that one again. So systemic invisible inflammation is the root cause of all dis-ease and chronic illness. And, you know, they've talked about this before. There was a great article in the Time magazine in 2004, and they spoke about invisible inflammation and how that's linked to, you know, it's the common factor in every single dis-ease and illness that we have. But there's no pharmaceuticals that can help that. In fact, they'll hinder that and add fuel to the fire, shall we say. So invisible inflammation isn't something you can detect on imaging. There are some blood tests that you'll be able to, especially if they ask for certain markers. So there's the CRP, the creative reactive protein tests, but that's more acute inflammation. And if you get into the erythrocyte sedimentary rates, the ESR test, that will help find markers of more chronic inflammatory cells. However, they aren't usually conducted, so you've got to ask for those if you're wondering what's going on. But the way we can find invisible inflammation is if you come and see somebody who's trained to find it, because you won't have pain in the system if you are inflammation free. And so you want minimal pain through the body. How do you know if you've got pain in through your organs? Well, you've got to have somebody to actually palpate them, to feel what they feel like, and are they sore when you palpate them. So that's somebody like me and my girls that were here this weekend. So yes, we do know that invisible inflammation is the root cause of all disease, and that stress, here's the other really important thing to remember, stress, whether it's emotional stress or physical stress or mental stress, that causes 95% of all disease. It's that impactful on the system, and emotional stress is the most damaging to us as humans from a physiological perspective. So really important to kind of have those links and be aware of those links. Nothing is worth getting sick over. And I say that to all the people that I work with, and having been on that side of the fence with adrenal exhaustion, certainly not a nice place to be, and that's all stress. In a conflict, being the worst of them all. So when you are in situations, I suppose, is a good one to look at that aren't resonating with your soul. That's going to cause more damage to you over time than anything else ever will. And I guess sometimes we don't even know that we're in a state where things are not aligning with our beliefs and values, because we may have compromised because for other reasons. And then over time, we realize that we're just not quite right. And that's sort of indicative of being in a state where we're unable to connect with our higher self as beings here on this earth. So, I made a little note here. It says, so how do you know? Like when your system is completely shut down, or you're in a state of fight, flight, fright. Like it's really difficult to know because you're disconnected. And, you know, I haven't really, every now and then I'll have an individual who comes to me and they're looking for answers. I've always been everywhere else, and they end up in my space. And sometimes there's such a disconnect with the physical body. Like it's insane. And so once that starts to come back online again, then we start to turn the corner and life changes. All right, so a greater understanding on how the body responds to input and how it behaves in particular to light has been explored by a Russia fella, Grakev. And that perks my interest once I'm reading in this article, because of course light is frequencies, right? Well, everything's a frequency. By the way, how was that full moon last night? Full moon, lunar eclipse. That was it. It's pretty sensational. I really enjoyed it. Hopefully you got a good look at it wherever you are in the world. So they really now had a look at how the body responds to light. So as I said before, in fact, all of our diagnostic scanning technologies are all about how the body responds to external stimuli. Heat, MRI, X-ray, that type of thing. And so now they've taken a bigger look into how does light impact and how does the body behave in response to light. So, and that's then been incorporated into a cognitive technology which improves the understanding on how the body regulates function. And it has led to development of a method to diagnose and treat dis-ease. So remember, this article was, did I say 2012? I want an attack. Because of that full moon last night, I didn't get to sleep easily. Those energies were beautiful. Anyway, so 2012, I was just checking, sorry. It's looking on my desktop. And 2012, this article was written. And so, you know, this is a new method that Russians have been using for quite some time to diagnose and treat dis-ease. And given the limitations that we have in the biomarkers and histopathologies, you know, we do need to be continuing to explore other perspectives. I really don't believe we've even, you know, we've got the tip of the iceberg in terms of understanding us as human beings. Really, it's exciting. I think it's a great time to be alive, because we're stepping into that space, that new way of being. So what they're finding with this method to diagnose and treat dis-ease, that it's conceivably more advanced than the biomarker techniques that we currently use. And so it has the potential to provide far more information about a person's health, and therefore better management. So remember at the start I was saying, you know, how is it that we've got, you know, some of the most incredible advancements in technologies and in healthcare, yet we've got an increasing rise of chronic illness and dis-ease. It just doesn't match up. And another conversation, you go into, you know, the GMO, you go into the additives we're putting in foods, the water. I mean, lordy, you could go on, right? The Wi-Fi. Don't think it doesn't impact you, because it does, and they know it, and there is plenty of research that says that. So, we've got all these amazing advancements, yet, we still aren't any better ahead. So given the fact that this is the potential to provide far more information about a person's health, then we are then able to step into better management. I mean, what a wonderful world that would be if we didn't have to watch people suffer from chronic illnesses like motor neurons. Diabetes, it's another. Heart disease, like cancers. Gosh, we need to do better. We owe it to do better for our future. So this is exciting that there's another way of diagnosing. So we currently, most of our medical management for chronic illness is through prescription of drugs. And the drugs, they suppress symptoms, or they manage symptoms, but they don't actually get in and address the cause or the source. So again, it's because they can't, because when you use the current diagnostic techniques, they have so many limitations that they're not actually looking, they don't find the source of the problem. So you can only ever kind of band-aid it. Not good enough, man. We know better. So there's a couple of things to consider. Now, this is coming from this article that was written in 2012, and that medical conditions are polygenic and multisystemic. And when you are considering the measure of the level of biomarkers, and that's your way of diagnosing, it's actually quite a flawed concept. As I said before, blood work is only a snapshot in time. It changes from moment to moment, so it's not giving you a true picture, and there are limitations in the other biomarkers, even if they are on more reliable testing, like, say, for example, through urine testing. And the other thing that they have said to consider is that the doctor's ability to diagnose. Now, this is by no means an attempt to, shit on any other profession whatsoever. But the more that we approach things with curiosity, we can then start looking at how can we better service and help and facilitate well-being in all other humans out there. So they said things to consider is the ability to provide an accurate diagnosis is actually quite questionable. And what they're finding, so this is the North American Journal of Medical Sciences, right? This is not in my opinion. This is coming through a lot of research. And even then, you approach it with curiosity. So they say, the doctor's ability to accurately diagnose, it's quite questionable. So keep that in mind if you are seeking advice from whatever practitioner you're going to. Even if you're coming to me, taking a look at concepts and understandings and perspectives, and then, of course, beliefs and values, and all of that are so important. And the ability of drugs to treat a disease is only about 50%. I mean, if that, really. And any medical assessment of which drugs are prescribed, pharmaceuticals, it's big money, man. So in any situation where drugs are going to be used as treatment, they actually really do require, and they must take into account, the level and conformation of protein levels, the levels and conformation of substrate, and the other factors that influence the rate at which the protein reacts with the substrate. So basically, we need to be able to understand the body we've got in front of us if we're asking it to metabolize a certain medication, because it's going to be different from person to person, and that is not factored in. And that is also why, say, for example, so when you're talking about the factors that influence the rate of metabolism and uptake of a medication are things like levels of pH of the blood, minerals in the system, and other cofactors. So there are a lot of variabilities from human to human, and this is where we see those that take some medications and have you know, so many more extreme effects. And the one that really comes to mind are your antidepressants, and how they have the ability to really perpetuate somebody's issue. So, and yeah, there's just so many variables that we need to be considering, which are not being considered when you go in for a 15-minute or 10-minute appointment with your GP. It's impossible. And we also must take into account that every drug alters the body's systemic, cellular, and molecular stability. And I say this to people all the time: if you're looking at, or if you are taking prescription medication, and there's no judgment whatsoever, there never is in this realm, that do consider, when they list the side effects, and I say this all the time, when they list side effects, reframe that and go, they're not side effects, they're direct effects. The reason they call them side effects is because they want you to focus on the main mechanism of interaction that medication is going to have. They know the other mechanisms of interaction and where the receptors for a certain medication are all throughout the body. So they're not side effects, they're direct effects. Remember that. So if you are prescribed a medication, look at the listed effects or adverse reactions and ask yourself, are those what you also want to have on top of what you're already dealing with? So just do some due diligence. That's all I suggest. But know that we need to take into account that everybody, the drug is going to alter your body's system completely different from person to person. And how well the body is able to readjust is so individualized as well. And how it's then going to go on and maintain optimal stability with utilizing a medication as well is different from person to person. So we adapt. That's what's so wonderful about us. Not so wonderful if you're taking a medication where your body's adapted to a certain level, and so you have to keep more and more. And this is why they say you need to be on some medications for a lifetime. Yeah. All right, so the other things, just to finish off, we'll talk about phenotypes. And these are there's phenotype and genotype, basically. So phenotype is how your environment, the influence on your environment on your physical body, okay, and therefore of your health as well. And the phenotype, it's all related to, say, the processes in the system. So level of pH, your temperature, your protein expression, etc., etc. So phenotypes are really linked to, if you follow Bruce Lipton's work, he's one of the world's most well-known stem cell biologists, and he discovered that actually it's not your genes that dictate your health throughout your life. It's actually how the environment impacts your genes. That's where the epigenetics comes in, so the above genes. And that's the phenotype, that phenotype and genotype within us. And so that has direct influence on all of the reaction and extraction processes in the body. That's just the environment, man. I mean, that's to do with energetics, are huge, and whether it's also a moldy environment, or just, it's really more about the stresses and the things that you can't necessarily put your finger on, shall we say. And But most of our approach comes from mathematical models and Newtonian science, and that approach fails to acknowledge the impact of environment on our gene expression. And if you only consider the genotype, which is the body's ability to express the genes, and by expressing the genes, you express certain proteins and certain sequences and orders, and that's where the DNA comes in, right? And that's kind of your code, right? But if you consider only that, and remember I said the other day, you only ever express 1.5% of your DNA. There's 98.5% you aren't even tapping into, and you hold the power to really unleash all in through your all infinite possibilities that your DNA holds. It's got, it's an antenna. It's a bioresonant acoustic biophoto antenna. So how you connect to your Wi-Fi. And as I said, we only express 1.5% of that. You can access more. You can. So that's what's so exciting. We're only just scratching, not even the surface when it comes to this. So if you only consider the genotype and the body's ability to express genes, then you can only deal with symptoms. Yeah, that's just a band-aid. Sweep it under the rug. Hopefully it'll go away. Not the best strategy. Symptom suppression. The body's signs and symptoms are your alarm bells. It's telling you something's wrong. And what's become quite common in presentations is certainly not normal. And these are the things that I'll speak about on Saturday if you're coming to our quantum healing event, where it's an introduction to frequency medicine. So if you consider the genotype, you're only dealing with symptoms. If you ignore the phenotype, meaning the environment's influence on your body and how it expresses the genes, then you're ignoring a significant influence on dis-ease, like significant. And how significant? Well, all you have to think about is that if your environment impacts you physically, and it's 96% of our environment is invisible, right? We are in a electromagnetic field, which is all light waves, particles, vibration, frequencies, vibration, and energy, basically. It's 96% of the world that we live in. You are only frequencies, vibration, and energy. So if we ignore the environment, that 96% of the world or that you live in, you really are ignoring a significant amount of influence on dis-ease. Like I said before, just blows my mind. It really does. It blows my mind. And this is where they say, you can't get well in the same environment that made you sick. So if you are struggling out there with a chronic illness or chronic dis-ease and you've tried everything else, do look into Bruce Lipton's or Dr. Bruce Lipton's work, Dr. Joe Dispenza's work as well, where they have really bringing in, the quantifiable aspects of this invisible space that you are connected to, consciousness. They're bringing that all in, and our understanding now is significantly higher than ever, before. Well, of course, the ancient medicines honored and worked within the vibration and frequencies and energetics as well, and we're more wanting to know how does it work, so we know more now. Anyway, so systems biologist, that's quite a Newtonian approach as well, the things that you can touch and see in the physical and the matter. The systems biologists, they ignore the influence of sensory input on organ functions. And each organ has its own vibration, right? There is a collection of specialized cells, and they communicate through vibration, through frequencies, and each organ is impacted quite differently, shall we say, in terms of the stresses, so the emotional stresses that you have. So anger, frustration, resentment, of course, the liver is significantly impacted by the particular vibration of those emotions. The liver is very susceptible to, for example. The spleen has its own optimal bandwidth of vibration also, and that is significantly linked with anything that's distressing from a family perspective. For example, kidneys are all about fear, breath of life. So we have these organs that are going to really be knocked down or impacted into more of a suboptimal bandwidth of frequency and vibration. So therefore, the processes that carry out become limited also, or suboptimal. So these Western approaches of these Newtonian science, systems biologists, they ignore all of that. They really do. And when there's quite significant physiological impacts on an organ, I mean, then on a whole systemic level, nothing's injured in isolation whatsoever. If you end up having, say, for example, I don't know, maybe your thyroid's impacted through stress, and that's all sort of about energy and metabolism and, cell energy and that type of thing. So all through its process of communications with the liver, et cetera, well, then the pancreas, for example, can be upregulated, and it has to overproduce its peptides and digestive enzymes and things, so that it can, because it's getting the hurry on and going, well, you know what, we're not creating enough energy at the moment, so I'm going to have to kick up and work harder, which is all very well until the pancreas becomes overworked. And so there's this yin and yang for everything, that there's balance. That's what we're about. So it has significant physiological impacts on body function. So we do need to learn to consider the environment and the influence of sensory input on your organ functions. And the other thing to note here is that according to medical journals, one of the most overlooked phenomenon are EEG frequencies. So the brain frequencies, like the alpha, delta, gamma, theta waves, and coherence within that, and its influence on how our system operates and is able to regulate, shall we say. And then the other thing that, according to medical journals, is overlooked is also the role of light. So they know this, you just don't get it in a mainstream arena, and those that speak of it get sort of put under the pseudoscience category. But there's plenty of evidence out there that A, it's overlooked, and B, the abilities to detect and therefore to diagnose and to also manage dis-ease and help the body restore, because it's inefficient to be in a state of dis-ease. It really is. There's a lot of evidence for that, and we just have to keep getting it out there, because there are so many other ways to restore from chronic illness. And so that excites me. But you are a light body anyway. So, of course, the role of light and how it impacts our systems ought to be high on the list of finding out more. All right, so virtual scanning. This is where we're going to get to, and this is the crux of the article that I was reading. And that virtual scanning has been incorporated into an advanced cognitive technology. And as I said before, the Russians have been using it, I think, since about 2001. And it's the first technique that's able to diagnose all major medical conditions in a single cognitive test. How cool is that? And how many practitioners are doing that? I don't know of any here in New Zealand. However, you don't know what you don't know. And I didn't even know that this particular virtual scanning was available. You can tell the glitch out. So lack of sleep last night. That blimmin' beautiful moon kept me up to about 2:30, so I can feel the fatigue setting in. Anyhow, so what was I just saying there? So the virtual scanning, yeah. So that is now around. I mean, there are bioresonance scanning that have been used for ages. I have spoke previously about these. The military use them, right? So the Russians use the Oberon. There's the Skio or the Skio that the Americans use, and the English use what's called the Libra. And they measure the frequencies, the millions of frequencies that are running through your brainstem. And it takes about an hour and a half to conduct a test, hundreds of thousands of dollars for these machines, but they can then find out what of the frequencies are suboptimal, and then what they do is they input a signal to correct it. See? They've been doing it for years. It's just that it's not mainstream. And again, anyone who is doing frequency, whether it's through acupuncture is a form of frequencies as well in terms of energy flow through the system. And how long was that told that it was a load of nonsense? Years and years and years until functional MRI came about. And even with the functional MRI, as I said before, we have wonderful scientists out there who are bringing quantitative data and evidence to coherence in through the neural signaling and the frequencies through the body. So it's all out there. It's all out there. So I'm just going to read off the last part of this from my article online, because I thought it might be a little easier. So I've talked a little bit about this virtual scanning. So it incorporates an understanding that stress/sensory input, an estimated 85% of it, of which is in the form of light, influences cellular and molecular biology. So, everything is light is frequency, and which is why UV light has been so great for us. Get out in the sunshine, get your vitamin D. The light, there's codes, there's information in through these light codes that are pouring in every single day. So get outside and get some sun on your body for sure. And so 85% of it is in the form of light, and that influences cell and molecular biology. And in particular, it incorporates the understanding that it influences the expression of proteins, and the rate at which such proteins subsequently react, it can be measured. So the absorption and emission of light from proteins provides the means to do so by measuring color contrast and color perception. So quite cool when you look at how they can measure what's happening when we're exposed to and how the body responds and reacts to light. So virtual scanning embraces an unprecedented understanding of the mechanisms of which the body employs to regulate its function. So, this is where I believe we need to step into this new way of understanding us as human beings. Hang on, I'm just going to close this off with one last thing here. The articles provides plenty of scientific basis basically for virtual scanning, and it proves that the methodology developed by this Russian fella is effective and works. And virtual scanning was first approved for Russian health services in 2001. So they highlight how more advanced it is from a technological concept, and how more advanced it is in terms of diagnosing and treating disease. So there you go. That's what I wanted to get across. Is that we are stepping into newer perspectives, better understanding. I mean, lordy, it is about time. And when you then also step back with curiosity and you see for how much weight and influence our pharmaceutical industry has on how healthcare is diagnosed and therefore managed, like it's it's just, what's the word for it? Preposterous. It's probably the word I was going to use. And it's a gazillion-dollar industry, so they aren't wanting you and I to explore other ways. And trust me, there are, and they know that, and this is why a lot of alternative perspectives are shut down, because they do work. Take, for example, frequencies. And there was something that just came to mind, and it's gone. See, it's what happens when you're fatigued, eh? Might come back to me. Maybe. But there's a lot of things. Speaking of, a lot of digital book burning going on at the moment. If you haven't noticed. Lordy. So whatever it is that's coming across your day, approach with curiosity, and as we're able to do that, and we don't succumb to our subconscious programming, which is based on previous experiences, of course. So if we're able to step back, we're not coming from fight, flight, or fright, and we're coming from a space of love, then we're able to observe the other person's behavior, and also observe what happens from a physical perspective. Because often things, when a system is stressed, it'll be quite obvious. They might speak louder, they might speak faster, they might laugh louder, or, there's all those extremes. Anything in an extreme is not good, right? However, they also may get skin changes also. So as the body becomes stressed, remember at the beginning I said, you release with every emotion, you're releasing a certain biochemistry as well. And our stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, are incredibly powerful, but they also are quite damaging to the system. So as you see them flooding a system, you can look at all of the peripheral oxygenation just gets it just changes, and you start to see skins, I don't know, becoming, well, I saw an example on the weekend where someone got a bit wigged out over a discussion, and they weren't able to discuss and listen to another person's point of view. And so as their system became more stressed, their skin looked like it was being poisoned. It was quite weird. Anyway, it's a great observation, and I think I might be done now. So wherever you're at, stay tuned. There is more. If you are coming, if you're in Auckland this Saturday evening, I am speaking more and more about the symptoms and signs you may experience. And again, we've created them to be normal, when in fact they may just be common, and it's just your body's way of saying, hey, this isn't working so well in me. So we're going to be discussing a little bit of that, different perspectives to certain diagnoses, shall we say, and other ways that you can look at restoring. So jump along, hit me up, it's in the events, and hopefully I'll see some of you there. Right, gotta go. I think it's time to enjoy a little bit more of this glorious space. Back to the study. Peace.